The scene replays in my memory like yesterday. My name is Katie, and I'm 32. Honestly, looking back, I'm baffled by my own actions. I was in the kitchen, engaged in a conversation with my sister Sarah about something that should have stayed private. You know how it is, saying something too bluntly only to realize you'd have been better off keeping silent? Yep, that was me. I didn't think he'd overhear, though perhaps deep down, I didn't deem it significant enough to warrant caution. I confessed to Sarah that given the chance, I wouldn't have married John, my husband. The statement slipped out casually, almost carelessly, as if I were discussing a bad hair day, not the man I pledged forever to. I can't even pinpoint why I said it. Maybe boredom, maybe I wanted her sympathy. John hadn't done anything wrong, not then. He was in another room, likely absorbed in his phone, as was his habit when relaxing after work. But the words were out, and then silence. Not Sarah's chatter, accustomed to my theatrical flair. It was a silence that suffocated like a sudden change in atmosphere. Turning my head, I saw him in the doorway. He said nothing. No raised voice, no requests for clarification, no visible anger. He just looked at me for a moment, his face an impassive mask, and then exited. The sound of the front door clicking shut made my stomach churn. I hadn't anticipated that. Truthfully, I expected an argument or at least annoyance. But leave? It wasn't his style. John was always composed, patient, the one who balanced my, let's call it, energy. I truly didn't believe he'd actually leave. I mean, I hadn't declared hatred or announced a departure. I was simply venting, right? Isn't that the dynamic with sisters? You say things you don't mean because they understand you. That's the unspoken agreement. Sarah was speechless, her eyes wide with disbelief. Instead of acknowledging my mistake, I compounded it. I laughed and said, "He'll get over it. He's just being dramatic." Why did I say that? Perhaps admitting fault meant facing the guilt, and I wasn't ready. Hours passed, and he didn't return. I tried calling him, and when there was no answer, I sent a text. "Are you okay?" Still nothing. Fine, I thought. If he wants to pout, his call. I wasn't going to plead over something minor. But as night wore on, a peculiar blend of anger and panic took hold. How dare he leave me hanging here? But where the hell is he? Is this some kind of lesson? I didn't go to bed until midnight, scrolling through TikTok, pretending I wasn't waiting for him to come back. He didn't. Finally, I gave in to sleep, more annoyed than anything. He'd return when ready, I told myself, and I wouldn't lose sleep over it. Spoiler alert, I did. The following morning, his side of the bed was still empty. His toothbrush remained in the bathroom. His shoes were by the door. He hadn't packed and left for good. But the uneasy feeling persisted. Another text. "Where are you? Can we talk?" Silence again. Now real worry began. Not because of remorse, but because I loathe being ignored. The silent treatment is a skill I have yet to acquire. If there's an issue, I require discussion, negotiation, and forward progress. John leans towards letting things settle, which drives me crazy. I confided in Sarah, and she suggested, "Maybe you should apologize." Apologize? For what? For being honest? For voicing my feelings at the time? I saw no reason to grovel simply because he happened to eavesdrop. "He shouldn't have been listening," I said, rationalizing to her more than to myself. Even as the words left my mouth, they echoed empty. By the day's end, resentment surged. Who did he think he was, getting me so wound up? If he disliked what I said, he could have stayed and addressed it like an adult. Instead, he bolted, leaving me the villain. Fine. Maybe I am. But I didn't utter anything false. I question if I'd be happier had we not begun our relationship. That doesn't negate the love I have, right? Yet despite my attempts to convince myself otherwise, a subtle doubt has begun to creep in. Did I cross the line? John's consistently allowed me to dictate, always agreeing, even when I knew agreement wasn't genuine. Perhaps I took it for granted. I just presumed he'd be constant, unwavering. Now, for the first time, I wasn't so sure. The clock ticked, and still no John. I attempted to call his mother, but she also knew nothing. Then, genuine worry set in. Was this more than just anger? Had something happened to him? But John's never prone to recklessness or foolish behavior. He's the most predictable person I've known. That predictability at times irritates me. By nightfall, distress consumed me. I was conflicted. Anger, worry, or indifference. I craved to text him again, but wanted to avoid seeming desperate. So, I just stared at my phone, anticipating the glow of a message that would never come. The next day, John was still gone. I told myself to be calm, yet each distant car's approach sent a jolt to my heart. I constantly checked my phone, refreshing messages like an idiot, as if I had skipped his reply. Nothing, not a word. Now, the irritation had firmly won. Who does that? Disappears without informing his wife? Immature, pure and simple. Then, staring at my coffee, realization hit. What if this time he was really gone? Had I finally pushed him too far? The thought was unwelcome, and the more I tried to ignore it, the more it lingered. John's not one for games, not for the silent treatment. If he'd left, there was a reason, and maybe it was more severe than I wanted to concede. Around noon, Sarah called to inquire. "Has he called you?" she asked. Her tone was softer than usual, as if trying not to frighten me. "No," I answered sharply. "And frankly, it's ridiculous. He is making this a mountain out of a molehill, not me." "Kat," she responded cautiously, "you're the one who made this a problem in the first place." I wanted to end the call. "You're supposed to be on my side," I said instead. But guilt stung. She wasn't totally right, but partially right. Maybe I had elevated it, but I never intended to cause pain. I didn't imagine he'd react this way. I didn't tell him I was leaving or that I didn't love him. Emotions are freely expressed. He's just overly sensitive. By night, I resolved to stop waiting. If he didn't come back on his own, I would search for him. Again, I called his mother, who knew nothing. I tried a few of his friends, who either were lying or truly clueless. One of them, Mark, expressed genuine surprise when I asked if John had contacted him. "Is everything all right?" he asked, and I battled the urge to lash out. "Yeah, fine," I answered quickly. "Just checking." After that, I drove around town for an hour, without direction. John wasn't inclined to bars, nor spend the night with a friend without communicating. He's steady, predictable. So where was he? When I returned, he was absent. His toothbrush, his shoes, everything screamed that he should be here. I stood in the kitchen for an eternity, fixated on the front door, wishing for it to open. But it didn't. The house was too quiet, and I hated it. I began browsing our joint bank account, half curious, half desperate to appear productive. And then I saw it. A hotel charge from that day. He wasn't at my mom's, or God forbid, with someone else. He was at a hotel alone. I didn't know whether to feel relief or anger. So, he was all right. Hiding in a hotel, avoiding me, as if I wasn't worthy of a discussion. The audacity. I instantly called the hotel. I didn't know what I would have said if he'd picked up, but it was irrelevant, because the receptionist wouldn't confirm anything. "I am sorry, ma'am," she stated in a fake, polite tone. "But I cannot disclose information regarding our guests." I wanted to scream. Instead, I hung up and composed a new text. "I know where you are," I wrote with trembling fingers. "Can you cease acting like a child and return home so we can discuss this?" I stared at the message for a few minutes, then erased it. If he chose to be a coward, so be it. I wouldn't plead. But the knot in my stomach wouldn't ease. I hated that feeling of lost control, of him gaining the upper hand. John was the one meant to pursue, to forgive, to let me vent, and then move forward. Always. Why wasn't that still the case? The following morning, the house was empty. It bothered me. The silence, the uncertainty. I attempted to concentrate on work, but every email derailed me. My world had imploded. My husband was gone, and I was utterly lost. I kept insisting to myself it wasn't that deep, just a need for breathing room. However, the longer he was absent, the harder it was to sustain that comforting illusion. By noon, the strain was unbearable. I drove to the hotel, disregarding how unhinged I likely looked. If he wasn't coming to me, I'd have to go to him. At the hotel, the receptionist gave me the stock speech about respecting guest privacy, and I struggled with the impulse to cause a scene. "He's my husband," I snapped. Yet she just flashed that customer service smile and stated, "I'm very sorry, ma'am." Reeling, I returned to the car. Sat there, staring at the steering wheel, I began to feel something I'd repressed for years. Genuine fear. What if he stayed away? What if I'd finally pushed it too far? What if deep down, I understood it wasn't just the things I had said to Danny? This wasn't the first time I'd spoken impulsively, and certainly not the first I'd prioritized my emotions over his. Maybe this time, he was finished. Despite wanting to concede, I was not ready to offer an apology. Not yet. I needed to see him, verify he was all right, and figure a way out of this crisis. Since if there was one thing I excelled at, it was cleaning up messes. And this was just another mess, right? I didn't have to wait much to see John after the failed hotel visit. Late that night, the front door unlocked and he appeared. He didn't slam or toss his keys down like I might have done. Instead, he walked in calmly, almost unnervingly, and I couldn't read him. The flatness of his expression made me uneasy. I was geared up for an argument or any kind of intense response, but this was more unsettling. He placed his bag down near the sofa and simply stood there, sizing me up as if weighing his words. For a split second, I expected him to go straight upstairs without a word. But instead, he spoke. "We need to talk," he said in a steady, almost detached tone. "Yeah, no kidding," I retorted, crossing my arms. I was already on the defensive, despite realizing I should have apologized. But I wouldn't start first. I was incapable. Admitting fault felt like it would hand him all the power, and I wasn't prepared to concede. He sat down on the sofa and motioned for me to join him. I remained standing, leaning against the kitchen counter as if I was completely occupied. "Are you going to explain your 2-day disappearance?" I asked, attempting to sound nonchalant, but my tone came out more sharp than I desired. John sighed, rubbing his hands together as if trying to warm them. "I needed space," he replied, "to think, to try and figure out how to even begin to talk to you after what I overheard." I rolled my eyes. "Oh, John, come on, seriously? You eavesdropped on one thing I shared privately with my sister, and now you're acting as though the world is ending." "It wasn't one thing, Katie," he replied, his voice raising slightly before calming again. "You stated you'd never date me again, and if given the opportunity, you wouldn't have picked me." "Well, maybe I wouldn't have," I blurted before I could stop myself. The words hung in the air, and for a moment I instantly regretted them, but I dug in my heels. "You've changed, John. We both know it. You're not the man I married. I faltered, attempting to find the appropriate words, but my emotions overwhelmed me. "You've gotten lazy, okay? You've let yourself go. You don't even try anymore. Honestly, you can blame me for feeling this way." He looked at me, and for the first time I noticed authentic pain in his eyes. But instead of getting angry, he simply nodded slowly, as if he'd anticipated this reaction. "So that's the state of it," he quietly observed. "You see me as fat and unattractive, and that's why you don't want to be with me." I rolled my eyes again, trying to shake off the weight of the statements I'd made. Don't twist my words. I never said I didn't want to be with you. I said, if I could rewind time, I could make a different decision. That isn't the same thing. I don't think so, he responded, his voice steady but firm. And you know what? Maybe you're correct. I've changed. I have gotten older. I've gained weight. I've mellowed. However, that's a natural part of marriage, Katie. You settle into a life together. You build a life. Or at least, that is what I assumed we were doing. I felt myself blushing, and a mixture of embarrassment and anger flared up within me. Don't place all of this on me, I insisted, raising my voice. Don't you notice how distant you've become? You scarcely talk to me anymore unless it's about work, bills, or dinner. You provide me with no cause to be content in this marriage, John. So now it is my fault? He queried, attempting to sound composed, although his tone betrayed his incredulity. I'm the reason you are unhappy? The reason you lack respect for me enough to discuss these issues openly with your sister? I raised my hands in frustration. You are completely twisting things. I'm simply saying, perhaps if you were to put forth a little more effort, engage in some sports, take more interest in me the way you did initially, I would not feel this way. He stared at me for an extended duration, and then did something unexpected. He slowly rose to his feet and directly locked eyes with me. You know, Katie, I believe that reveals more about you than about me. What does that mean? I demanded, suddenly feeling a wave of panic. He didn't yell. He didn't retaliate as I anticipated. He remained collected, and for some reason that only intensified my feeling of inadequacy. It means, he continued in an even tone, that you are blind to what you have. You have a man who has consistently supported you through your impetuous choices, your spending habits, your fluctuations, a man who has never judged you for it. Rather than appreciating that, you seek ways to belittle me. I opened my mouth to reply, but he didn't allow me. I know I'm not perfect. I'm aware I've changed, but you have too. And not for the better. You've turned into a person who shirks accountability, and instead of engaging in honest communication, you lash out and would rather blame me instead of looking inward. His words hit me hard, but instead of conceding he may have a point, I countered with another attack. Oh, so you're now perfect? Some kind of saint holding this marriage together while I'm the problem? He shook his head and grabbed his bag again. No, I'm not perfect, however. I am striving to improve myself, Katie. I am exhausted by being here while you constantly make me feel you don't need me. If you don't recognize any value in me anymore, then perhaps we should take a break. I was stunned. What are you implying? I'm implying I need more than this, he said, gesturing between us. And if you're unwilling to work on it, maybe I shouldn't stay here. He did not yell. He did not slam the door as he left. He just walked out, leaving me in place, dumbfounded and more confused than I'd ever been. In the following weeks, reality hit me squarely. John didn't come by, not even for the mail. The emptiness felt heavier with each passing day I returned to the house. It was more than just the physical absence. It was the silence, the lack of his presence that was hurting me. I started to reach out to him more frequently, tentatively testing the waters. His responses were polite, but distant. Hope you're well. I will drop by on the weekend to gather my things. That was all. No warmth, no chance for conversation. He wasn't malicious, but it was evident he no longer desired vulnerability with me. The weekend arrived, and I was afraid to face him. As he walked through the door, he looked different. His shoulders seemed broader, his posture straighter. He'd trimmed his beard, and it even looked stylish, clean, focused. He even smelled different, like he'd started using cologne. I didn't want to admit it, but he looked better than he had in years. Hey, I said awkwardly, standing at the kitchen table as he walked in. Hey, he replied, nodding slightly, nothing more. He didn't ask how I was or attempt to start a conversation. Instead, he went straight to the bedroom and started putting his belongings in boxes. I followed him, uncertain what to say, but desperately trying to break the silence. "Derek, could we talk?" I asked, my voice softer than usual. He didn't stop packing. "About what?" I hesitated. "About us." He stopped and looked at me, an unreadable expression on his face. "About us, Katie? You already made your sentiments abundantly clear." "That's not how I meant it," I replied swiftly, moving closer. "I was agitated. I was not thinking clearly." He shook his head and returned to packing. "No, Katie, you knew what you were doing. You just didn't anticipate I would overhear you." A lump formed in my throat. "I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did," he stated firmly, finally looking at me. "And it's more than this conversation. It is everything. The way you talk to me, the way you treat me, like I'm never good enough for you." I felt tears welling up, but I forced myself to maintain my composure. "I was wrong. I understand I was wrong. However, we can fix this. We've endured worse, haven't we?" He smiled wryly. "Really?" "Because in my opinion, we haven't ever been through anything quite like this, Katie. I do not believe I have ever felt so disrespected or unwanted. And the worst of all, I stayed. I persevered, even when it was clear you did not appreciate me. It's my fault. I allowed it to go this far." His words were like a punch to the gut. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, however I couldn't. Deep down, I knew he was right. So what? Is that it? Are you abandoning me? My voice trembled, and I hated the desperation it conveyed. "I am not giving up," he stated calmly. "I am simply choosing myself. I am weary of proving my worth to somebody who doesn't see it." My mind raced as I looked at him. This wasn't how it was supposed to play out. He was supposed to forgive me and suggest that we figure things out, together. But instead, he stood there, composed and resolute, like he had already reached a conclusion. "I can change," I uttered, the words a mere whisper. "I'll make an effort. I'll be better." He exhaled and placed the box he was holding down. "Lindsay, I truly hope you do, but not for me. Do it for yourself. But I can't hold my breath for you to get there. I spent years striving to make you happy, and all I got back was criticism and ill will. I deserve more." His words cut deeper than I had expected. Tears welled up, and this time I didn't try to hide them. "I don't want to lose you," I said, my voice wavering. "Please, John, we can fix this." He regarded me for a lengthy moment, and for a fleeting instant, I believed I saw something flash in his eyes. Perhaps regret, or maybe remorse. However, he then shook his head. "I've already sacrificed too much trying to repair things," he said quietly. "I can't do this anymore." He picked up the box and departed the room, leaving me standing there with a shattered heart. I yearned to pursue him, plead for him to stay, but I knew it wouldn't alter anything. He had made up his mind, and for the first time, the realization dawned on me that I might lose him indefinitely. In the subsequent days, I sought to distract myself. I buried myself in work, socialized with friends, and did everything I could to evade solitude within the house. But regardless of what I did, the emptiness persisted, haunting me. John's absence extended beyond the physical. A part of me had gone with him. A month later, I saw him again. He was in a cafe, seated at a table with an unfamiliar woman. She was attractive, not overwhelmingly beautiful, but she possessed a certain natural ease. They were laughing, and he looked joyful, happier than I had seen him in years. I considered approaching them, disrupting their private moment and reminding him that I was still his wife, but I didn't. I simply observed from a distance, feeling the full impact of my own mistakes. It was my fault. I had driven him away, broken him, and now he was living a life without me. When he saw me, his smile briefly faltered, but he displayed neither anger nor resentment. He simply offered a slight nod in acknowledgement and returned to his conversation. It was as if I had already become a memory to him, something he had left behind. As I departed the cafe, I felt the weight of my decisions fully. I had spent so much time blaming him, fixated on his faults, that I failed to appreciate how much he gave me. And now, it was too late. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly alone. And for the first time, I grasped that it wasn't John who had disappointed me. It was me. I came to consciousness from an annoying beeping sound to my left and an irritating itch above both breasts. Opening my eyes, I saw that I was in some kind of medical facility. There were wires attached all over my body. When I tried to lift my arms, I discovered that tubes were stuck into both limbs, connected to various bags of liquid. How did I get here? I thought, still in a foggy state of consciousness. Hearing a noise, I turned to see a bed on the other side of the open curtain. My husband, Anthony, was half sitting, half lying on the bed with his laptop on his knees, propped up by a couple of pillows. Anthony's expression reminded me of our wedding ceremony more than 7 years ago. I remember he had the same look on his face when he stood next to his brothers at the altar as I walked down the aisle that day. I tried to speak, but only a faint wheeze came out of my throat. Anthony put down his laptop and limped over to me. He poured water from a jug on the table next to my bed into a cup. He put a straw in the cup and brought it to my lips. "Kate, you need to drink slowly." My throat was parched, so I ignored his warning and began to drink greedily. I started to choke and cough. He took the straw from my lips and wiped the excess water from my face and neck with the edge of the sheet. "Kate, I told you not to rush," he said gently before bringing the straw back to my lips. "There's a lot of water in there. You don't need to choke on it." After taking another sip of water, I felt my parched throat return to normal. I shook my head, removing the straw from my mouth. Anthony put the cup of water back on the low table and sat down on the bed next to me. "How did you get here?" I asked him. "What am I doing here?" He paused for a second before answering. "Ice." I gave him a puzzled look. "Ice, Kate. Do you remember ice in case of emergency? My brother made all of us put ice in front of the phone numbers in our cell phones for family members to contact in case of an emergency. It helps paramedics and law enforcement." I thought, oh yeah, his brother is a big bad cop. My husband's whole family thinks that pathetic poser is Dirty Harry, and that little Dago just sits at his desk every day. "Dago speak," I heard my husband say. "What?" I said, snapping out of my daze. "Kate, you called my brother a little Dago. My mother is Cuban and my father is Italian, so technically, my brother and our whole family are Dago Spikes, macaroni Latinos, slang." Damn, I thought. I didn't mean to say that out loud. These drugs must really be getting to me. "And Kate," he continued, "while it's true that my older brother works for the Metro PD, that's because he was shot in the leg 10 years ago while protecting a group of cashiers during a bank robbery. He didn't just get a disability, he went back to school and got an accounting degree. Now he heads the forensic accounting department for the city police. With a pen and spreadsheets, he's put more drug dealers and gangsters behind bars than most cops with a gun." Never mind. I really didn't want to talk about his damn family. What am I doing here? How did I get to this hospital? What happened? When will I get out? Anthony paused again, and it started to annoy me. He and his family always did things like that to annoy me. I think they did it on purpose to make me lose my temper. "Kate, you had a very bad reaction to the drug. The bad news is that it destroyed your kidneys and liver and damaged your heart. The good news is that Mom made the whole family get tested to be donors. My brother, my older sister Mary Beth, and I are all a match. It's about time you and your family were good for something." The words slipped out before I could stop myself. I really needed to watch myself. The drugs were definitely loosening my tongue. "Well, Kate, it's nice to know how you feel about—" He was interrupted when a tall doctor in surgical scrubs entered the room. The doctor still had a cap on his head with a mask pulled down over his neck. "Fontaine?" the doctor asked, holding a tablet in his hands. "Yes," Anthony and I replied. The doctor looked at me for a second, then added, "Mr. Fontaine?" My husband raised his hand. "Mr. Fontaine, I was the lead surgeon on the transplant team. I wanted you to know that everything went well." The recipient, the doctor glanced at his chart, then at me. "He is expected to make a full recovery, although he will need to be monitored closely, but I'm confident we've pulled through. However, there has been one complication." I saw Anthony wave his hand at the doctor, interrupting him. "Thanks, Doc. Your administrator explained it to me after the surgery in the recovery room. We appreciate you stopping by." The doctor looked at him, then at me. He started to say something, but stopped and just nodded before leaving the room. Even in my semi-drugged state, I breathed a sigh of relief. I was going to be okay. After the doctor left the room, Anthony limped over to his bed. I called out to him, "Did you hear that? I'm going to be okay. The doctor said I'll make a full recovery." Anthony just grunted and then turned away, holding a folder of legal documents in his hand. "Kate, do you want to explain this?" Although my vision was a little blurry, I could read the title. Petition for Divorce. Yes, Kate, you can imagine my surprise when, after receiving a call that you were in the hospital, my brother and I rushed to leave our office building, and some joker in the lobby called my name and handed me this. He threw the piece of paper onto my lap. "Any comments?" "Oh, Anthony, sweetie," I began. "Kate, please don't call me that. I'm not your sweet Anthony." His voice was cold and emotionless. "Honey?" I paused, then started again. "I know how much you love me. This transfer you've decided on only proves how much. But I've never loved you the way you love me." I tried to collect my thoughts, but under the influence of the drugs, it was difficult to form a coherent sentence. "Marrying you was a mistake. I was at the lowest point in my life. My parents had just died. My financier, Trey, had just broken up with me. I felt alone. You were just a rebound that went too far." "Yes, Kate. I understood that from your letter." He handed her another sheet of paper. "You couldn't even end the marriage in person? You had to write a letter?" "I'm sorry. Type a letter. Who types and prints a letter that starts with Dear John, or in this case, Dear Anthony?" "Anthony, baby." "Kate, I asked you not to call me that. Also, I'm not your baby, Anthony." His tone was completely emotionless. "Just tell me how long you've been messing around with this marriage." "You misunderstood everything. It wasn't like that, Anthony, dear." "Kate, please, could you not call me that?" He leaned back against the headboard. "Did this start a year ago? A month ago? A week ago? This is the last time we'll see each other. You could at least tell me the truth about our relationship." It must have been the drugs because I suddenly didn't care anymore. "Okay, you want the truth? Here it is. At first, they were just a bunch of brainless college boys. They were nobodies, just young toys I let play with my body, just flings to make me feel better, less lonely. But then Trey came back." Anthony interrupted me. "How long after the wedding did you start sleeping with your ex-financier Trey, who you claimed broke your heart?" "Don't talk about him like that. Trey and I are soulmates. It sounds strange now because I cheated on him and he cheated on me. But Trey contacted me about a year after the wedding. Trey apologized for breaking up with me. He said it was the worst decision of his life. I knew I was a married woman, but deep down, I knew that Trey and I were meant to be together forever. Anthony, sweetheart, you have to understand. Kate, I told you I'm not your dear Anthony, but answer me this. Why did you stay married for almost 10 years? You could have left at any time. Why cheat for so long? Anthony, baby. I stopped when he gave me a cold look. It was just interesting, and you would never have known. Like the saying goes, if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, it didn't make a sound. Kate, are you trying to tell me that if a spouse cheats on their partner and no one sees them having fun, it's not cheating? When you say it like that, it sounds so nasty. Besides, don't tell me you've been a good guy all this time. What about the hunting trips you and your brothers go on every year? Hunting! Nonsense. Some of you don't even take your guns with you. And what about that hot chick who's always hanging around you at family events? Don't tell me you didn't sleep with her. Kate, you're worse than I thought. First of all, hunting trips are just a trip to the family cabin for the guys. There's nothing worth hunting there. Some of my brothers only take firearms to shoot at targets. I saw him shake his head. That girl, Chinky, has a name. It's Kim. My parents sponsored her after she fled Myanmar and brought her to this country at the age of 7, after Kim saw her family killed by government troops. My whole family took care of her. Kim followed my brother and me everywhere because we were closest in age. Yes, of course, your younger brother. If he's not high, he sits at home and reads all day. Kate, I hope it's drugs that are making you say that, because I'd hate to think that our family took in such a bitch. That wasn't the brother little Kim was always around. For your information, my younger brother, whom you despise, has a bad back and damaged lungs. He got them after carrying a pregnant woman and her baby down 6 flights of stairs during a fire at his former workplace. As for him sitting at home reading all day, he's recording books for visually impaired school children. He says that if society gives him money, he has to give something back. Can you say the same about your boyfriend, Trey? Now I was getting angry. How dare he talk to me like that? That's your way. You and your family. Half of our social outings are always related to some kind of fundraiser or charity event. Even when you were sitting at the governor's table at the New Year's Eve party, all he talked about was how much money we raised for his son. How boring. If I remember, Kate, you took that money and spent it on yourself. So what? I raised all that money. Why shouldn't I get something out of it? Anyway, you paid the money back. No one ever found out. You never understood that you have to make yourself happy first and then worry about others. So, Kate, are you happy now? I'll be happy once I get out of this damn hospital. I tried to sit up a little more, but it felt like moving through jelly. Trey has a great plan. We're going to triple the money in my trust fund. If you want the truth, that's why I finally broke off the sham marriage. I don't need you as a backup plan anymore. Trey and I need to be free to be happy. I'm tired of being supported by my trust money. Then I softened a little. But now I see that maybe I was wrong about you. So consider all the trust money you've been using all these years as payment for the organs you've just given me. Kate. I saw him shake his head. Your trust money ran out long ago. Most of the trust money was invested in mortgage-backed securities. Those funds evaporated during the housing crash. Add to that your spending, and your trust was nearly depleted before you returned from your honeymoon. Anthony, you're such a child. The drugs have made me softer. You don't have to lie about the trust money to hurt me. It's not like you didn't get anything out of our relationship. Let's be honest. I'm a much hotter woman than you could have gotten if I hadn't been on the rebound. Completely out of your league. Anyone can see that. We were good in the bedroom. I mean, not as good as with Trey when he... I caught myself. Anyway, try to look back on our time together as the best you deserved. Karma for all the good deeds you and your crazy family keep doing. Meanwhile, Trey and I will be together, as we should be. 2 kindred spirits, bound together forever. All we need is each other. Is that so, Kate? Then why did you empty the bank accounts and demand half the house in the divorce? I stared at Anthony. Something had changed in him. Oh, Anthony, dear. I saw him smirk. I had to get something for the time I spent with you. You know, compensation for being with you all this time. You and your, family. The countless get-togethers, Thanksgivings, Christmases, and birthdays. Thank God it's all over. Now it's just me and Trey for the rest of our lives. I began to think about my future with Trey when another doctor entered the room. This man was shorter and older, dressed in a typical white lab coat. Mrs. Fontaine, may I call you Kate? The older doctor addressed me when I nodded. I want you to know that we are not giving up on you. We have already called several donor organizations, so I don't want you to lose hope. Time is short, but we may still have a few cards to play. Now I was confused and turned to this new doctor. Maybe he had me mixed up with someone else. Lose hope? Other donor organizations? Doctor, the other surgeon said the transplant was successful and that I would make a full recovery. The elderly doctor looked puzzled. He looked at me several times, then at my husband, before speaking again. Kate, this other doctor, was he a tall gentleman dressed in medical attire? I nodded. Kate, he was the head of the transplant team. I mean, your husband's organs, his kidney, and part of his liver were successfully removed and delivered for transplant. The transplant was indeed successful. Bad thoughts began to seep into my drug-addled mind. The doctor put his hand on my shoulder. Kate, you were lying on the table. We were about to open you up when we received word that the organs, your husband's organs, were going to another patient. Even the tubes and wires couldn't hold me back, and I sat up in bed. What are you saying? I almost shouted at the doctor. I turned to my husband, Anthony, who was sitting on another bed. Anthony, what is going on? Kate, I'm telling you for the last time, stop calling me Anthony. I looked closely at the man and saw that it wasn't my husband, Anthony, sitting on the bed opposite me, but his older brother, Mark. Of all his brothers, my husband, Anthony, and his brother, Mark, looked the most alike. Same hair color and style, almost identical build. They even talked the same way, using similar expressions. I often confused them when I drank too much at his family gatherings. The medication must have clouded my mind. Mark, is that you? I said, trying to realize that it wasn't my husband Anthony in the room, but his brother Mark, whom I had been talking to all this time. Yes, Kate, it's me, Mark, Anthony's brother Mark said to me. I've told you half a dozen times that I'm not Anthony. Damn, I should have known it was Mark. That damn limp, the injury he got in Iraq, should have tipped me off. How dazed was I? Pushing Mark out of my mind, I turned to the doctor who was watching the scene awkwardly. Doctor, please explain what's going on. I need you to start from the beginning. Well, Kate, I'll try, said the doctor, sitting down in a chair. I was called when you were admitted to the emergency room. It appears you had been using some kind of recreational pharmaceuticals. We thought it was crystal meth or crack, but what was in the drugs you took turned out to be even more toxic, a very nasty concoction. Now it all came back to me. Trey and I were celebrating filing for divorce and the beginning of us being together forever. Trey said he had some killer hits. I remember Trey talking me into snorting it through a straw. I felt a wild rush from inhaling it. It was like the best feeling of my life, multiplied by 10. The last thing I remember is inhaling a line of that crap from Trey's chest. I came back into the room as the doctor was finishing his story. Kate, the tests show that your kidneys and liver are damaged beyond repair. We have several problems because even if we could find donors who would give you kidneys and a liver, your heart was also so badly damaged that it would require a complete transplant. Therefore, no donor council would even consider you as a candidate. The risk was too great. Even with the painkillers, I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "Doctor, what's going to happen to me?" The doctor stood up and walked over to the IV, adjusting something before speaking again. "Kate, let's increase the dosage a little more. I don't want to put any more strain on your heart than necessary." He sat down again. "Kate, without a kidney and liver, you had less than 72 hours to live. But when your husband agreed to donate his kidney and part of his liver, it gave us hope that we could convince the hospital's donor council that you were a suitable candidate for a heart transplant. You had a strong family, a reliable support system at home, and all that. This last-minute change in your husband's, donor's plans has really thrown a wrench in our plans. I'm very sorry. We'll do our best to make you as comfortable as possible." Suddenly, his pager beeped. The doctor looked at the number before silencing the shrill sound. "Listen, Kate, I have to go, but I'll send someone else right away to explain some options to you." Breathing a sigh of relief, the doctor quickly left the room. Only my husband's brother, Anthony, Mark, and I remained in the room. Mark was my least favorite member of Anthony's family. Everyone considered Mark a great war hero only because the fool didn't have the sense to abandon a group of wounded men in battle, even when he ran out of ammunition and water. That's how he lost his leg. What kind of moron doesn't know when it's time to cut and run and take care of the important things? I felt like yawning. The increased dose of painkillers was kicking in. A wave of calm washed over me. Well, I thought, what did you expect from Anthony's family? I remember Mark went to law school with the disability money he got from the government. Just what the world needs, another lawyer helping other losers. He was such a loser. Mark will never understand that in this world, you have to look out for yourself. I wondered if I could get an honest answer out of him. "Mark, why did Anthony change his mind about being an organ donor? Anthony got his divorce papers. Why couldn't he just give me his organs so Trey and I could be together?" I really didn't feel any pain. I thought I heard Mark snort before he answered. "Kate, my brother Anthony never received your divorce papers. Anthony and I work in the same building. Your stupid bailiff filed the divorce papers with me. Anthony knows nothing about divorce papers or that you've been cheating on him all these years, and that's how it's going to stay." Mark walked over to my bed and picked up the divorce papers. "Kate, my brother Anthony was in the hospital before I arrived. In fact, he was already under anesthesia. But luckily for me, Anthony gave me power of attorney, since I'm the lawyer in the family." I watched as Mark folded the divorce papers and put them in his pocket. "Kate, I couldn't stop Anthony from donating his kidney and part of his liver, but there was a clause in the medical power of attorney that allowed me to change the recipient if the original recipient proved to be unstable. Even through the fog of the sedative, I knew it was wrong. Mark, you can't do this. Those organs were mine. My husband, Anthony, wanted them to go to me." Mark sat down on the bed opposite me again. "Kate, you're both right and wrong. For starters, Anthony wasn't going to be your husband." He patted the divorce papers in his pocket. "However, you're also right that I couldn't just decide on my own to refuse Anthony's organ donation. I needed the hospital's permission." Then Mark gestured toward the other side of my bed. "Hi, Kate. How are you feeling?" I heard a woman's voice and turned my head to see Mary Beth, my sister-in-law, Anthony's older sister, standing at my bedside. I hadn't even heard her come into the room. Mary Beth stroked my hair, reaching out to feel for the regulator on one of the IV lines. "I don't know if you remember, Kate, but I'm the chief administrator at this hospital." I vaguely remembered Anthony and I going to Mary Beth's promotion party. Something about the first nurse to work her way up from nurse to administrator of a large hospital. "You see, Kate, I couldn't believe you could do something like that to my little brother. I was shocked because I knew Anthony worshipped the ground you walked on. This divorce and betrayal will kill him, but don't worry, Kate. Anthony will never find out. Only Mark and I know about it. But you'll be happy to know that Anthony's kidney went to a worthy person, a young mother of 4. She had been on the transplant list for a long time. Her husband was in Anthony's room with their children, trying to thank him. It was very touching. Part of his liver went to a sick Vietnam veteran. It's great that the country can repay him for his service. I saw Mary Beth turning the dial on the regulator that controlled my pain medication. Then I heard Mark's voice, but I couldn't find the strength to turn my head. Unfortunately, Kate, it looks like there have been some complications with Anthony's transplant. He's in a medically induced coma. By the time he wakes up, you won't be alive anymore. I'm sure he'll be sad. But as you've already noticed, Kim, the chick you thought Anthony was sleeping with will be happy to fill the void in Anthony's lonely life. Trey, I managed to stammer. Trey knows, Trey. My fiancé will tell him. Mary Beth pressed a few buttons on my monitor. I'm afraid not, Kate. It looks like your lover Trey was unlucky and died before the paramedics got to his house. My brother's a cop with connections. You were never at the scene, at least not officially. Your death will just be one of those tragic events that no one could have foreseen. No, no, no! I tried to speak, but I could barely hear my own voice. Well, it's not all tragic, Kate, Mary Beth continued. Something good will come out of this. I saw that you have an organ donor card taped to the back of your driver's license. No! I managed to squeak out. Well, now you will, Kate, I heard Mark's voice through the fog. Look at it this way. It's a win-win situation. Even if you got Anthony's kidney and part of his liver, your heart wouldn't last the week. If a heart were found, the chances of you surviving the operation would be slim. So Anthony saved 2 lives, and you have a chance to save several lives too. Yes, Kate. I recognized Mary Beth's voice as if through a tunnel. Your kidneys, liver, and heart are damaged, but some of your other organs are still usable. We have recipients for your lungs, corneas, bone marrow, a bunch of other usable organs, and even skin tissue once you're gone. Since you love having other people play with your body so much, we're going to donate the rest of you to medical students. I tried to speak, but no words came out. The last thing I heard was Mark's voice. Kate, I know how much happiness means to you, so you're going to get your wish, the one you talked about so much. You and your soulmate Trey will be together forever now. I hope you both enjoy rotting in hell. Last call, I shouted, ringing a small antique bell hanging on the wall behind the bar. It was 1:15 midnight, and according to Missouri law, Riley's Tavern had to close at 2:30. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. One guy protested loudly. Who are you to tell us to leave? I motioned him over to the bar. You can leave right now, I said quietly, or I'll throw you out. And by the way, I'm Tom Larson. I own this place. He started to argue, but when he saw the look on my face and assessed my height, he decided that caution was the better part of valor and quickly left. You can't blame him. At 6 feet 4 inches and 250 pounds, I'm big enough to back up my words. A 3.8-centimeter scar running almost vertically under my right eye also gives me a sinister look. It's the result of a bar fight many years ago when I was young and foolish. Some of my unmarried female friends, as well as a few married ones, say the scar doesn't bother them. One even told me that with my black hair and dark, brooding eyes, the scar gives me a sinister look. And many ladies thought it would cheer me up. I heard the usual objections and requests not to cover it up, but as usual, I ignored them. A wave of last-minute drink orders came in from people who were still celebrating the birthday. When the party started at 6:30, there were 20 or more of them. 2 drunks who had been drinking from 2 glasses got drunk and left. Couples and singles found company and left. Only 4 or 5 of the birthday girl's close friends remained. The friends laughed and had fun. The next day, they would have a terrible hangover. It was a good thing it was Saturday. The birthday girl was in much better shape. In almost 6 hours of partying, she had drunk 3 glasses of Asti Spumante. I placed a fresh glass of the drink in front of her. I didn't order this, she said, puzzled. I don't want to drink anymore. I don't know your name. Tom Lawson, I introduced myself, shaking her hand. I had been serving her friends all evening, but it was no surprise that she didn't know my name. It was her first time at Riley's. Your friends ordered it. Try it, Rebecca, I suggested. Her friends had been shouting her name all evening, and I would have had to be deaf not to remember it by then. She took a cautious sip and smiled. I filled the glass with soda and added a slice of lime. Thanks. I don't usually go to bars or drink, but my sister, the one in the red dress who's all over the guy on the dance floor, insisted that I come and celebrate her birthday. She's driving, so I'm stuck here until she's ready to leave. I'm Rebecca Kelly. I'd noticed her all evening for two reasons. First, after 2 rounds of drinks, she stepped out of the crowd and sat down at a table by herself. Her sister and a couple of other people came over, trying to drag her onto the dance floor and get her to join the fun, but she just smiled and shook her head. About an hour ago, she walked over to the bar, grabbed a 3rd glass of wine, and sat down on a bar stool. The second reason I noticed her was because she was as cute as a spotted puppy. Rebecca had long brown hair braided into a French braid that fell down her back and big green eyes that sparkled and were full of wonder at the world. In addition to her hair and eyes, she had a few freckles on her nose and cheeks, just enough to look charming. Her father and mother must be tall, I thought. She and her sister must be at least 5 feet 7 inches. Happy birthday, I said with a smile. It's on me. Thanks, she replied with a smile. I heard you tell a drunk guy that this was your place. I thought it was called Riley's. Looking over her shoulder, I leaned over the bar. Get off the table if you don't want to pay, I said to the 2 girls who had decided to dance on it. And put something on. My order was met with good-natured laughter from the 2 men who remained in the group. You can dance and strip on your car hoods if you want, but I don't have a license for entertainment. Turning to Rebecca, I answered her question. Yes, this is my bar. When I bought it, it was called Riley's, and I saw no reason to change the name. Riley's sounds better than Lawson's, doesn't it? Besides, I made a promise to the previous owner. And you promised to keep the name Riley? Then she blushed and stammered an apology. I'm sorry. It's none of my business. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. I inherited a lot of regular customers and they like the name, but that's not the only reason. It's a long and boring story. Rebecca looked at me for a few seconds and smiled. I'd like to hear it sometime. I responded with a look. If you want to stop by sometime in the evening when you have time, I'll tell you my sad story. I'll even buy the wine. Hey, Becca, her drunk sister called out, approaching the bar. I'd better take you home before you get so drunk you can't walk. With that, she slipped and would have fallen if Rebecca hadn't grabbed her and held her up. Winking at Tom, Rebecca said, Come on, Julie, take me home before I embarrass myself. With the help of the guy Julie had been dancing with, Rebecca escorted her sister to the door. See you soon, Tommy, Rebecca said as she left the bar. She may be tall, but she's not skinny, I thought. Rebecca had a strong, athletic body, but when she walked toward me or away from me, there was no doubt that she was a woman. She had curves in all the right places. I turned to the people who were still in the bar. You have time while I go around the bar, collect empty glasses, and finish my drinks, I said. By the time I reached the tables, everyone was waving goodbye. Thanks to it being mid-June and daylight saving time, the bar was flooded with sunlight when the door opened. I looked up when the bar patrons began to complain about the bright light. Riley's bar was dim but not dark, so patrons could find an oasis from the sunlight or streetlights and the stress of everyday life. Rebecca quickly closed the door, smiled, and said, Sorry. She walked over to the bar and sat down on a stool next to the counter. I smiled back at her. Welcome. Would you like some company? It's not very busy today. How about that table? She asked, nodding toward the 6 men. They were the only other patrons in my establishment. Serving beer every 40 minutes doesn't count as company. Smiling, she reminded Tom, "You promised to buy me wine and tell me how you became the owner of Riley's." "I came here for what I'm owed." I hadn't expected her to take my promise seriously. At best, I had hoped she would return to see me, but not to hear this story. I poured her a glass of wine. "Thanks," Rebecca said. "Now tell me." I paused for a few seconds, thinking about what to say. "Well, I worked here when I was in college. After I graduated, I got a job, worked for a while, and then came back. I had been working here for about a year when Riley said he wanted to retire and help me buy the place. That was a little over 3 years ago." "How old are you, 30-something?" Rebecca asked. "You couldn't have worked in this field for long. So what is it, really?" 32, I replied. For some reason, I didn't mind that a virtual stranger wanted to know about my life. I felt that it wasn't just morbid curiosity, but genuine interest. "It's a story without a happy ending. In fact, if you want to know the truth, it's pretty depressing. Are you sure you want to hear my sad story?" "You promised." I had to admit that I wanted to get to know Rebecca better. After looking at her for about 10 seconds, I made up my mind. I graduated from Washington University here in St. Louis. If it weren't for a scholarship and a few grants, I wouldn't have been able to attend this expensive university. In any case, I took advantage of the help and earned a degree in business administration. Then I got a good job at a local company and started climbing the corporate ladder. One of the men at the table went to the bar to order more beer. I paused my story to take his order and returned to Rebecca. I was moving up the career ladder quickly, but after 6 years I became disillusioned and quit. I spent so much time at work that I had virtually no personal life, and I saved most of my salary. My expenses were minimal: rent, utilities, and food. Hell, I didn't even have a car. I lived 3 blocks from the office and walked to work even in the winter. When I quit, I had enough money to live on for 3 or 4 years before I had to look for a job, but I needed something to keep me busy, so I decided to go back to Riley's. This time, one of the men ordered 6 shots of Jack Daniels. I poured them and helped the guy carry the shots to their table. I went back to Rebecca. I filled her glass with wine and continued. "As I was saying, I worked for Riley almost full-time for about a year. Then he decided to move to Arizona to be closer to his son and grandchildren. I gave him a large down payment, and Riley worked out a payment schedule that worked for everyone. Such a nice tavern must have cost a lot. It's amazing you were able to save that much in 6 years. Laughing, I replied, "I told you Riley gave me a great discount. I gave him $50,000 as a down payment and $2,500 a month." "How many months?" Rebecca blushed and added, "I'm sorry, that's none of my business. Riley was 70 when he retired. I'll pay him $2,500 a month for the rest of his life." I shook my head and laughed again. "That old rascal will probably live to be 100. Rebecca laughed with me. "Okay, so that's how you acquired the tavern, but why did you leave a good job?" "That's a story for another time, young lady." "Is that a polite way of telling me to mind my own business?" "No. It's a way of telling you that I need to get to know you better before I go into details." Rebecca reached across the bar and took my hand. "Well, let's start somewhere. How about dinner later, when you're done here?" "The bar's closing," I called to the group at the table. "Finish up and go home." "But it's only 11, one of the men grumbled. "You usually work until 2:30. "I'm required by law to close at 2:30, but the law doesn't say I have to stay until then," I replied. "I'll buy you a last round, but drink up and go home." Tom and Rebecca went to a small family restaurant next door. Carmine's usually closed at 11, but Tom knew the owners, Pete and Teresa, and they made an exception for him. Tom and Rebecca repaid them by ordering everything left in the kitchen instead of choosing from the menu. Tom hung a new sign in the bar announcing that Riley's would be closing at 10 p.m. every Monday and Thursday. These days, he and Rebecca would go out to dinner, see a late movie, or go to a dance club. Each date brought them closer together. That first night opened a new chapter in Tom's life, and Rebecca became its central figure. He hired an unemployed friend to work for him on Saturday evenings. Now Tom had the whole evening and the whole day for Rebecca. They spent almost every weekend together. They had many interests in common. Tom discovered that Rebecca loved nature as much as he did. On Saturdays, they would drive out of town and stay there until the last minute on Sunday. Despite her love of camping and nature walks, Rebecca had never been fishing. She was, in essence, a city girl who had fallen in love with country life. When Tom first took Rebecca fishing, she immediately took to it. She had a little trouble casting, and Tom took a picture of her with the line draped over her shoulders like a shawl. He enlarged the photo, put it in a frame, and hung it in his office at the tavern. "When things are going badly, or I'm nervous, I can look at this photo and laugh," he explained to Rebecca, who slapped him hard on the shoulder. 2 months of dating at least twice a week convinced Tom that he had found someone special. He wanted to take the relationship to the next level, but he knew he had to tell Rebecca about his past. They had just returned to his apartment after a pleasant dinner on Saturday evening. Sitting on the sofa by candlelight with a glass of wine, they began to kiss more passionately. After a few minutes, Tom pulled away and leaned back against the sofa. "Tom, is something wrong with me?" Rebecca asked, with a playful smile. "Wrong? No, you're fine. I know you like me, and I can see that I turn you on. But why haven't you tried to make love to me yet?" Tom sighed, looked at the floor for a few seconds, then shook his head. "Before we go any further, there's something you need to know about my life." Tom paused, then added, "Remember when we first met, I told you there was another reason I gave up my career and came back to work for Riley?" Rebecca nodded, and Tom continued, "Well, as they say, that's the rest of the story, and you need to know about it before we move on to a more serious relationship." "Wait," Rebecca said, filling their glasses with wine. "I have a feeling this is going to take a while." When she settled down on the sofa next to him, Tom began, "I went to work at Dunhill right after college. It was an entry-level position, but I was attentive, a quick learner, and got a couple of promotions. I was on the rise. I saw myself as a senior vice president by the time I was 30, and then I met Stella." Tom stood up and asked, "Can we go out on the terrace?" "I need a cigar." "You don't smoke," Rebecca said, but she followed him anyway. "I smoke when I talk about Stella." He lit the cigar and took a puff. "Okay, you said you met Stella. What happened next?" Rebecca prodded Tom. She wasn't sure where he was going with this. "Stella worked for a company we did business with. We met at a few meetings, and being the youngest employees in the company, we immediately liked each other. You could say I fell in love with her during those meetings. She was smart, educated, and knew her way around the business. People listened to her when she spoke, first because she was very beautiful, and then because what she said made sense." Tom smoked his cigar for a few seconds, went into the house, grabbed a small glass of bourbon, and returned to the terrace. Stella was, and probably still is, a beauty. She's about 5 feet 8 inches, with long blonde hair and big brown eyes. If we lived in California, she would be called a beach beauty with a toned body. She was a typical blonde cheerleader, but as I said, she wasn't empty-headed. Turning to Rebecca, Tom asked, "Are you sure you want to hear this?" Rebecca nodded. "You can't stop now. I think you owe me a full explanation." Tom nodded. "Yes, I suppose I do. Anyway, Stella and I started dating. To spare you the details, we moved in together. We lived together for about a year, then got married. For 3 years, I thought we were the happiest couple on earth." Tom paused and took a big gulp from his glass. He looked at the green strip behind his house. "What changed?" Rebecca asked. Her company was an investment group, and they had a big client in California who wanted to talk to someone in person. Stella was chosen to meet with him. It was very important to her. Sounds good for her and for you. Yes, I thought so too, until she came home. Stella walked into the apartment, and instead of a welcome kiss, she said the words no man wants to hear from his wife or girlfriend. "We need to talk," she said. Tom went to refill his glass, but stopped. "Go on. What did she want to talk about?" Stella said that the client had signed the contract but offered to double his investment if she spent the night with him. She said she turned him down. Tom smiled sadly. "Well, that's good, isn't it? I mean, she didn't go down the path of infidelity," Rebecca replied. "Yes, that's good. But she told me she turned him down not because we're married, but because she didn't want to earn a reputation as a promiscuous employee. She said she should have thought about us and our marriage, but instead, she thought about her reputation first. Stella said she thought about how an affair, even a one-time thing, would affect her career at the company, and she didn't like it. Stella asked me, 'What does this say about us and our marriage?' The next week she left and filed for divorce. We divided all our property and I was left alone." Tom leaned against the railing surrounding the patio. He stood up and said, "That's a sad story. We got divorced quickly, and she continued her career. I drifted for a year, then decided I didn't want to work there anymore and quit. There was nothing interesting left for me in that job. So I sat around for 6 months, then went back to work at Riley's." Tom looked straight at Rebecca. "I should have told you all this before. If you want to leave, I'll understand." Rebecca got up from the chair, took Tom by the hand, and led him into the bedroom. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, Mr. Larson," she said, closing the door behind her. The next day, Tom and Rebecca began moving her things to his apartment. She had sublet her apartment not because she wasn't sure she wanted to live with Tom, but because she was getting money from the new tenant. They discovered that the only thing that had changed in their relationship was that they no longer had to run between 2 apartments. Tom looked up from the bar when a ray of late sunlight entered the large room. The silhouette of a person entering was visible in the sunlight, and Tom could only make out that it was a woman. When the door closed, the light from the bar illuminated the woman's face. "Damn," Tom said quietly, recognizing the woman. It was his ex-wife, Stella. Over the years, Tom had managed to cope with the pain, anger, and regret of Stella leaving him. But seeing her for the first time since their divorce, all those suppressed and almost forgotten feelings came flooding back. Stella walked over to the bar and sat down on a stool across from Tom. "Hi, Tom. How are you?" she asked. "Good to see you." "What do you want, Stella?" "I'm in St. Louis on business and thought I'd stop by to say hello. I thought maybe we could talk." "Yeah? We don't have anything to talk about, so hi and bye, Stella." Tom tossed the towel he had been wiping the bar with into the laundry basket. "But Tom, I wanted to—" "I don't care what you want, Stella. I missed you, Tom. I thought about you a lot, wondering if I did the right thing by leaving." "Why now? Why after 3 years?" "I don't know. I've just been thinking about you a lot lately. Stella, I've moved on. I'm happy. Listen, Tom, I know I'm too late. I know I wasn't part of your plans. But I thought since I'm here, we could meet, at least for old time's sake." Tom didn't answer, just shook his head. "I'm here, and I'm a little lonely. Aren't you lonely, Tom?" Stella didn't wait for his answer. "We could spend the night together, and neither of us would be lonely." Tom just stared at her. "Let's not think about tomorrow. Let's just enjoy tonight. What do you say?" "You're a little later than usual," Rebecca said when Tom walked into the kitchen. She was finishing up the meatloaf for dinner. Tom usually came home at 7 since he hired Jerry, the new bartender. "Yeah, 2 softball teams came in after the game. Jerry was swamped, so I stayed and helped him with the first orders." Tom sat down at the kitchen table and watched Rebecca bustle around the kitchen. Rebecca turned and looked at Tom. You seem distracted, dear. Is something wrong? Are you okay? Actually, everything's fine. He paused and added, although I had an unexpected visitor today. Rebecca looked at him questioningly. Stella stopped by this evening. Your ex, Stella? Yes. What did she want? Rebecca asked. Tom realized she wasn't happy that Stella had stopped by. She said she was lonely, that we could spend the night together. Tom noticed Rebecca tense up. She said we could spend the night together and not worry about tomorrow. What did you say? Tom paused and smiled to himself, making Rebecca wait for his answer. I told her I already had a green-eyed, red-haired temptress and that there was no room in my life for another woman. Good answer, Rebecca said. Instead of putting the meatloaf in the oven, she put it in the refrigerator. Rebecca walked over and knelt down in front of Tom. Stella was right about one thing after all. What? We have tonight, Rebecca replied, resting her head on Tom's shoulder. Not just tonight, Rebecca. We have the rest of our lives.